You know, I have to smile because people always say you're the greatest con man or the greatest confidence man.
Throughout history, criminal masterminds have captivated the public with their audacious schemes and uncanny ability to evade justice. In this video, we'll delve into the stories of 15 real-life criminals who outsmarted authorities, pulled off incredible heists, and left an indelible mark on the world of crime. Number 1. Frank Abagnale Jr. Frank Abagnale Jr., a master of deception, began his criminal career at the tender age of 16. He successfully posed as a pilot, doctor, and lawyer, forging checks and conning his way through life. Abagnale's exploits inspired the movie Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. His ability to assume various identities and forge documents made him one of the most notorious con artists of his time. Abagnale's criminal journey began when he posed as a Pan Am pilot, taking advantage of the company's corporate perks and flying over 1 million miles for free. He then moved on to masquerading as a doctor in Georgia and later as a lawyer in Louisiana. His forged checks amounted to millions of dollars, and he managed to stay one step ahead of the authorities for years. Eventually, Abagnale was caught in France and served time in multiple countries before being extradited to the United States. After his release, he turned his life around and became a respected security consultant, assisting the FBI in catching other fraudsters. His incredible story serves as a testament to both the allure and the consequences of a life of crime. Number 2. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the notorious Mexican drug lord, built a vast criminal empire and managed to escape from maximum security prisons not once but twice. As the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, Guzman oversaw the smuggling of massive quantities of cocaine, methamphetamine, and other drugs into the United States. Guzman's first prison escape in 2001 involved hiding in a laundry cart and bribing guards. After his recapture in 2014, he stunned the world by escaping again through a sophisticated tunnel dug beneath his cell. The tunnel, equipped with lighting and ventilation, led to a construction site nearly a mile away. During his years on the run, Guzman managed to evade capture by staying in remote hideouts, employing a network of informants, and even undergoing plastic surgery to alter his appearance. His ability to corrupt officials and maintain loyalty within his cartel made him a formidable figure in the world of organized crime. Ultimately, Guzman was recaptured in 2016 and extradited to the United States, where he faced multiple charges related to drug trafficking and money laundering. His story exemplifies the power and influence of drug cartels, as well as the challenges faced by authorities in bringing them to justice. Number 3. D.B. Cooper. The mystery surrounding D.B. Cooper has captivated the public for decades. In 1971, a man using the alias Dan Cooper hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft, extorted $200,000 in ransom, and parachuted from the plane, never to be seen again. Despite extensive investigations, Cooper's true identity remains unknown, and the case remains the only unsolved air piracy incident in U.S. history. Cooper's meticulous planning and calm demeanor throughout the hijacking suggested he was no amateur. He knew the aircraft's capabilities and used this knowledge to make his daring escape. After securing the ransom money and parachutes, Cooper jumped from the rear of the plane into the frigid night sky over the Pacific Northwest. In the years following the incident, the FBI conducted a massive manhunt, following up on countless leads and tips. However, no conclusive evidence has ever been found to identify the hijacker. The only physical evidence discovered was a small portion of the ransom money, found along the Columbia River years later. The enduring mystery surrounding D.B. Cooper has inspired countless theories, books, and movies. Some believe he survived the jump and lived out his life in secret, while others speculate that he perished in the wilderness. Regardless of his ultimate fate, D.B. Cooper's audacious crime and subsequent disappearance have cemented his place in the annals of criminal history. Number 4. Ted Kaczynski, Unabomber. Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, was a brilliant mathematician who conducted a mail bombing campaign that terrorized the United States for nearly 2 decades. From 1978 to 1995, Kaczynski sent handmade bombs to universities, airlines, and individuals, killing 3 people and injuring 23 others. Kaczynski's intelligence and meticulous planning allowed him to evade capture for years. He crafted his bombs using untraceable materials and left no discernible pattern in his choice of targets. His manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, railed against the negative impact of technology on society and demanded that newspapers publish it in exchange for an end to the bombings. It was this manifesto that ultimately led to Kaczynski's downfall. His brother recognized the writing style and contacted the FBI. After his arrest in 1996, Kaczynski was revealed to be a reclusive former professor living in a remote cabin in Montana. Throughout his trial, Kaczynski's mental state was a subject of intense debate. Despite being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he was found competent to stand trial and eventually pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The Unabomber case highlighted the challenges of identifying and apprehending a lone wolf terrorist and serves as a chilling reminder of the destruction that a single, determined individual can cause. Number 5. Allen Stanford. Allen Stanford, a former Texas financier, orchestrated one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, swindling investors out of more than $7 billion. Stanford's fraudulent investment company, Stanford International Bank, lured clients with the promise of high returns on certificates of deposit. Stanford's charisma and lavish lifestyle helped him gain the trust of investors, including many wealthy individuals and institutions. He used the money from new investors to pay returns to earlier ones, creating the illusion of a successful investment strategy. Stanford also bribed regulators and auditors to maintain the facade of legitimacy. As the global financial crisis took hold in 2008, Stanford's scheme began to unravel. Investors started questioning the bank's ability to maintain such high returns, and regulators intensified their scrutiny. In 2009, the FBI raided Stanford's offices, and the true extent of his fraud was revealed. Stanford evaded authorities for months, fleeing to Antigua and Barbuda, where he held dual citizenship. He was eventually arrested and extradited to the United States to face charges of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The Stanford case highlighted the need for stronger oversight of offshore banking and investment practices. It also demonstrated the devastating impact that financial crimes can have on individuals and communities, as many of Stanford's victims lost their life savings. Stanford's ability to evade justice for so long, despite the scale of his fraud, underscores the challenges faced by authorities in pursuing complex financial crimes. Number 6. John Dillinger. John Dillinger, a notorious bank robber during the Great Depression era, captured the public's imagination with his daring escapades and multiple prison breaks. Dillinger's criminal career began in the early 1930s, and he quickly gained notoriety for his bold robberies and ability to evade law enforcement. Dillinger's most famous prison escape occurred in 1934 at the Crown Point County Jail in Indiana. He managed to flee using a fake gun carved from wood and blackened with shoe polish, cementing his reputation as a cunning and resourceful criminal. Throughout his crime spree, Dillinger and his gang robbed numerous banks and even police arsenals, stealing weapons and bulletproof vests. His ability to stay one step ahead of the authorities, coupled with his charm and media savvy, made him a folk hero in the eyes of some Depression-era Americans. However, Dillinger's luck eventually ran out. After a series of close calls and narrow escapes, he was betrayed by a friend and gunned down by FBI agents outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. His death marked the end of an era and served as a reminder that even the most notorious criminals could not outrun justice forever. Number 7. Al Capone. Al Capone, the infamous Chicago gangster, built a vast criminal empire during the Prohibition era through bootlegging, gambling, and racketeering. Capone's rise to power was marked by ruthless violence, including the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929, in which 7 of his rivals were gunned down. Despite his notorious reputation, Capone managed to evade prosecution for years by leveraging his political connections, intimidating witnesses, and maintaining a veneer of respectability. He even portrayed himself as a public benefactor, opening soup kitchens during the Great Depression. However, Capone's downfall came not from his violent crimes, but from his failure to pay income taxes. In 1931, he was indicted on charges of tax evasion and served an 11-year sentence in federal prison, including a stint at the infamous Alcatraz. Capone's life and crimes have been immortalized in countless books, movies, and TV shows, cementing his status as an iconic figure in American popular culture. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of power and the inevitable consequences of a life of crime. Number 8. Albert Spaggiari. Albert Spaggiari, a French criminal mastermind, orchestrated one of the most audacious bank heists in history. In 1976, Spaggiari and his gang tunneled into the vault of the Société Générale Bank in Nice, France, and spent an entire weekend emptying safety deposit boxes of their contents. Spaggiari's meticulous planning and attention to detail ensured the success of the heist. The gang entered the bank through a sewer system, using tools and equipment they had hidden in the tunnel months in advance. They even brought provisions to sustain themselves during the long hours spent inside the vault. After the robbery, Spaggiari managed to evade capture for years, taunting the police with cryptic messages and clues. His reputation as a gentleman thief, coupled with his daring escape from a courtroom during his trial, only added to his mystique. Spaggiari's life on the run came to an end in 1989 when he died of throat cancer in Italy. The stolen money from the Société Générale heist was never fully recovered, and many of the details surrounding the crime remain shrouded in mystery. The Spaggiari case highlights the allure of the perfect crime and the public's fascination with criminals who manage to outsmart the system. It also serves as a reminder of the meticulous planning and audacity required to pull off a heist of such magnitude, and the enduring impact that such crimes can have on the public imagination. Number 9. George Leonidas Leslie. George Leonidas Leslie, a former architect turned criminal mastermind, was responsible for orchestrating a string of bank robberies across the United States in the late 19th century. Leslie's gang, known as the Leslie Gang, was credited with committing over 80% of all bank robberies in the country during their active years. Leslie's architectural background proved invaluable in planning his heists. He would meticulously study the layout and security measures of each target bank, identifying vulnerabilities and devising ingenious methods to overcome them. His gang was known for their swift and precise execution of robberies, often completing the job in mere minutes. Despite the high frequency of their crimes, Leslie and his gang managed to evade capture for years. Their success was due in part to Leslie's strict code of conduct, which emphasized discipline, discretion, and loyalty among gang members. He also insisted on non-violence during the robberies, a rare trait among outlaws of the era. Leslie's criminal career came to an abrupt end in 1878 when he was found murdered in New York City. The circumstances surrounding his death remain a mystery, with some speculating that he was killed by a rival gang or a disgruntled former associate. Nonetheless, his legacy as one of the most prolific and successful bank robbers in American history endures to this day. Number 10. Veerappan. Veerappan, born Kusumunaswamy Veerappan, was a notorious Indian bandit who terrorized the forests of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka for nearly 3 decades. He was known for his ruthlessness, cunning, and ability to evade capture despite a massive manhunt involving thousands of police and military personnel. Veerappan's criminal activities included poaching elephants for ivory, smuggling sandalwood, and kidnapping for ransom. He and his gang were responsible for the deaths of over 180 people, including police officers and forest officials. Veerappan's intimate knowledge of the dense forests and his network of informants allowed him to stay one step ahead of the authorities. One of Veerappan's most audacious crimes was the kidnapping of famous Indian actor Rajkumar in 2000. The actor was held captive for 108 days before being released in exchange for a substantial ransom and the release of several of Veerappan's gang members from prison. Despite numerous close calls and encounters with law enforcement, Veerappan managed to evade capture for years. His larger-than-life persona and Robin Hood-like image among some of the local population added to his mystique and complicated efforts to apprehend him. Veerappan's reign of terror finally came to an end in 2004 when he was killed in an encounter with a special task force. His death brought closure to one of the longest and most intense manhunts in Indian history, and served as a reminder of the challenges faced by authorities in bringing elusive criminals to justice. Number 11. Victor Lustig. Victor Lustig, a cunning con artist of Austro-Hungarian origin, is best known for his audacious scheme of selling the Eiffel Tower. Not once, but twice. Lustig's criminal career spanned several decades and involved a series of elaborate scams that left his victims bewildered and penniless. In 1925, Lustig posed as a government official and convinced a group of scrap metal dealers that the Eiffel Tower was set to be demolished. He managed to sell the iconic structure to an unsuspecting businessman for a considerable sum before fleeing to Austria with the money. Astonishingly, Lustig repeated the same scam just a month later, this time narrowly escaping arrest. Lustig's other notable cons included selling a money printing machine that allegedly produced flawless counterfeit bills. He would demonstrate the machine's capability using genuine money, then switch it out for a worthless replica when making the sale. By the time his victims realized they had been duped, Lustig had already made his escape. Throughout his criminal career, Lustig used his charm, intelligence, and multilingual skills to deceive his targets. He moved frequently and used numerous aliases to stay ahead of the law, and his ability to identify and exploit human weaknesses was unparalleled. Lustig's luck eventually ran out in 1935 when he was arrested in the United States for counterfeiting. He was sentenced to 20 years in Alcatraz, where he died in 1947. Despite his ignominious end, Lustig's legacy as one of history's most infamous and audacious con artists endures. Number 12. Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas, the infamous Harlem drug kingpin, built a vast heroin empire in the late 1960s and early 1970s. His story gained widespread attention following the release of the 2007 film American Gangster, which chronicled his rise to power and eventual downfall. Lucas's criminal enterprise was built on a combination of ruthless business tactics and innovative drug smuggling methods. He famously claimed to have smuggled pure heroin from Southeast Asia inside the coffins of American soldiers killed in the Vietnam War. By cutting out middlemen and obtaining the drug directly from the source, Lucas was able to undercut his competitors and offer a higher quality product. At the height of his power, Lucas's Blue Magic heroin was the most sought-after drug on the streets of New York City. His organization, which included family members and trusted associates, was responsible for distributing massive quantities of heroin throughout the city and beyond. Lucas's wealth and influence allowed him to maintain a lavish lifestyle, with luxurious homes, expensive cars, and custom-tailored suits. However, Lucas's success also attracted the attention of law enforcement. In 1975, a joint task force of New York Police Department and Drug Enforcement Administration agents raided his home in Teaneck, New Jersey, seizing over $500,000 in cash. Lucas was eventually convicted of drug trafficking charges and sentenced to 70 years in prison. In a surprising twist, Lucas became an informant for the government while incarcerated, providing valuable information about other drug traffickers in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was released from prison in 1991 after serving just 15 years. Number 13. Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson. Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson, a notorious Harlem crime boss, rose to prominence in the early to mid-20th century. His life and crimes have been depicted in various films and television series, including The Cotton Club and Godfather of Harlem. Johnson earned his nickname Bumpy due to a bump on the back of his head. He began his criminal career as a numbers runner and extortionist, eventually gaining control over the illegal gambling operations in Harlem. Johnson's power and influence grew as he formed alliances with other prominent criminals, including Dutch Schultz and Lucky Luciano. Throughout his reign as a crime boss, Johnson navigated the complex racial and political landscape of Harlem. He positioned himself as a defender of the black community, using his wealth and influence to provide financial support to those in need and to fund various community initiatives. This carefully cultivated image helped Johnson maintain a degree of public support despite his involvement in organized crime. Johnson's criminal empire was not limited to gambling. He also had interests in prostitution, extortion, and drug trafficking. His ability to forge alliances and navigate the often violent world of organized crime allowed him to maintain his position of power for decades. However, Johnson's criminal activities also made him a target for law enforcement. He was arrested numerous times throughout his life, but managed to avoid lengthy prison sentences through a combination of legal maneuvering, witness intimidation, and political connections. In his later years, Johnson's health began to decline, and he increasingly relied on younger associates to maintain his criminal enterprise. He died of a heart attack in 1968, leaving behind a complex legacy as both a notorious criminal and an influential figure in the Harlem community. Number 14. Meyer Harris, Mickey Cohen. Meyer Harris, Mickey Cohen, a notorious gangster active in the mid-20th century, ruled the Los Angeles underworld with an iron fist. Born in 1913 in Brooklyn, New York, Cohen began his criminal career as a boxer before transitioning to a life of organized crime. Cohen's rise to power in Los Angeles began in the 1930s when he worked as an enforcer for the Chicago outfit. He later aligned himself with the infamous Bugsy Siegel, helping to establish the Flamingo Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. After Siegel's murder in 1947, Cohen took over his criminal operations in Los Angeles. As the head of the Cohen crime family, Mickey oversaw a vast network of illegal activities, including gambling, prostitution, drug trafficking, and extortion. He used his connections to corrupt police officers and politicians to maintain his grip on the city's underworld. Cohen's flamboyant personality and media savvy made him a celebrity figure, often appearing in newspapers and rubbing elbows with Hollywood stars. Despite his power and influence, Cohen faced numerous legal challenges throughout his criminal career. He was arrested multiple times on charges ranging from tax evasion to murder, but often managed to avoid conviction through a combination of legal maneuvering, witness intimidation, and jury tampering. In 1961, Cohen was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Upon his release in 1972, he found that his once powerful criminal empire had crumbled. Undeterred, Cohen sought to regain his former power and wealth, but his efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Number 15. Aladino Aviles. Aladino Aviles, a former U.S. Customs inspector, orchestrated one of the most brazen and long-running corruption schemes in the history of American law enforcement. For over a decade, Aviles used his position to facilitate the smuggling of vast quantities of drugs, weapons, and other contraband across the U.S.-Mexico border. Aviles began his career as a customs inspector in the 1990s, working at the Calexico Port of Entry in California. However, he soon began using his knowledge of border security procedures and his access to sensitive information to assist drug cartels in their smuggling operations. In exchange for his cooperation, Aviles received millions of dollars in bribes and kickbacks. As part of his scheme, Aviles helped drug traffickers evade detection by providing them with information about law enforcement operations, including the locations of surveillance cameras and the schedules of customs inspectors. He also facilitated the passage of vehicles containing hidden compartments filled with drugs through border checkpoints. Aviles' corruption extended beyond his own actions. He recruited other customs inspectors to participate in his scheme, creating a network of corrupt officials who helped to ensure the smooth flow of contraband across the border. Despite the scope and duration of his criminal activities, Aviles managed to evade detection for years. His knowledge of law enforcement procedures and his ability to exploit gaps in border security allowed him to operate with impunity. Aviles' luck finally ran out in 2006 when a joint investigation by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security exposed his corruption. In 2009, he pleaded guilty to charges of conspiracy, bribery, and importation of controlled substances. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison and ordered to pay millions of dollars in restitution and forfeiture.